All right. Well, welcome to the farm virtually, Bing. You
Thank you.
are tell us where you're at today.
Covington, Georgia,
Yeah,
in my home
so on the other side of
office
Georgia.
studio. Yeah.
Yeah, and Hugo and I are here on the farm, and we're here for the Farming Podcast, and I'm just really honored and excited to have you here today, Bing. Our lives and our story intersected a few years ago, and man, there has been a lot of water under the
Oh
bridge.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And I can count on one hand probably the number of people that I have the depth of relationship with that I do with you. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I'm just honored that you'd be, willing to share some of that story with the rest of the world here on Leader Farming Podcast. I mean, we may have, two listeners, or we may eventually have a lot more than that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the idea here is I feel like I've been called to just really perpetuate this message of a seasonal growth mindset, and it shows up so much in our lives all the time in what we do professionally and personally. And I really feel like it's a message that is necessary for this generation.
Yeah.
And when people can reframe the way they think about growth in a seasonal growth mindset, so you've lived that. And so without me, for those that have listened to this for several episodes, and they know what we're talking about. um, why don't This is something I've never actually done before, but you and I've done so much together.
Yeah.
Why don't you reframe in your words, like what is it we're talking about here? What is this
Yeah.
seasonal growth mindset? And then jump straight into just a story about your life and
Yeah.
a winter season, and what and how you grew through that. So
Well,
you
I'm
take
I'm
take the
on
mic.
I'm honored to be here too, Zach, and I want to put out a little tasty hook for the 2 to 20,000 people that are listening out there. That where we're going to go with this is a place where you'll be able to find yourself in the story, and you'll be able to kind of grab a hold of that hook and go, okay, I've got some ways that I can apply this in my life and the lives of those around me to make a difference. And so I'm excited about where we'll go with this today. And I can say that confidently, even not knowing exactly where we're going to go, because I just kind of know how things go. So, the thing I'd like to say, Zach, you asked me to talk about the winter season. And what I can do is I can tell you, looking back from what I think is the spring into the winter, and it was a long, hard winter, and both of you guys went through this with me, much of it. And to say, spring is coming and summer's coming, and if you're in a winter season, I'm grateful to be able to share from the other side and the hope of, you're going to get through this. A lot of times people will say, what would you tell your former self? And I would go back and say, you're going to make it, you're going to get through this. It's going to be good. And so that's kind of the frame, I think, of what I'm coming into this. And the other thing is, if we get a chance, I really want to talk about some things that happened during that time as we worked together
Yeah.
that helped me put some frameworks around ideas that I had and helped me test some ideas that are now really helping me and a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, the floor is yours. This is a
Mm.
time I want you to be able to tell your story and just share. Because honestly, I can say that I do not know a single person that has a more powerful story than you. And so,
Wouldn't
I
wish it on my
mean,
worst enemy, but yeah.
yeah. And so, I mean, I think those that are listening are in for quite a treat, to be able to hear from you on the other side of that story
Mm.
of what you've gone through and overcome, and where you are today. And I'm just again, I'm honored to have you here. And so
Thank
the
you.
mic's
Thank you.
yours, the floor's yours.
Well,
just give it to us.
when I recently shared this story, Zach, at church, my pastor asked me to get up and share my testimony. And I thought, I started off with saying, I'm not going to do It Was a Dark and Stormy Night. This is not going to be a novel. And so what I did was I capsulated into three things. One is, how's your heart? And what are you doing with your mess? And who is your tribe? Are you leaning into your tribe? Mm-hmm. And so the part about my heart was that it's a really massively condensed the story. Anybody out there want to hear more of it? I'd be glad to talk with you and share more of it. But the how's your heart was the story was culminated or in the middle of the story was when Zach and I met, and he has a picture up on his wall somewhere of this general, scooping up this other, I guess, general and rescuing him in a cowboy gunfight. And that's where Zach and I met. I had been an accomplished business leader and business consultant. And I just had this massive disaster where the most important thing in my life fell apart, which was my family. I had a health misdiagnosis that really messed me up. And then while I was starting to rebuild all that, we met, and thankfully, and I was working with Zach and Hugo, and I had met someone and fell in love. It was a wonderful person, and found her dead. And so when that happened, I'd already was at what I thought was the bottom. I'd lost business, family, home. I was pretty much homeless. Finance. I mean, just like everything in your life that could be ruined had been ruined. And I was at the bottom, and I was beginning to rebuild, and I met someone and found her dead. And I just kind of looked up at heaven and went, okay, God, what do you think I'm made of? Like, I don't think a human being can handle this much pressure. And that then went into a long season of really saying, hey, I'm going to manage the relationship part of my life. And hands off, God, I've got this. And so it was under new management, and that didn't go so well. And really, because I realized that if you surrender part of your life, it's like partial surrender is not surrender. It's only surrender is surrender. And so it took quite a few years to work through that trauma and go, okay, God, I'm going to trust you again. And now my heart is full. People have often said, how is this a good thing? And I'll share that I think that when your heart expands from pain, it remains expanded in its capacity to love. And so I'm now married to I was just literally in the other room just going, I can't believe that I get to be married to you. You are my best friend. And I just love doing life with you. And we certainly have our complications. But I'm raising a teenager, and I'm having a ton of fun leading people in creative leadership, which is kind of the vein I'm in right now. And so that's the heart. What are you doing with your mess really was, I got to a point towards the end of the hard season where, in the submission, where I thought I had it under control, and I was sitting in a business meeting, and I was wondering if I was struggling with some addictions, and I had been checking out addiction resources online, and I opened my computer to do some business, and there sitting on the screen was this addiction thing. And I thought, well, I could kind of play this off like I was doing this for a client. I don't know if anybody noticed, but I just began to think, man, my suitcase of messes was like I was sitting on top of it, and the monsters were starting to stick their tentacles out, and I wasn't able to keep it contained. And that was when I realized, I got to do something. So I did go through a season of addiction stuff. And I personally, there's a lot of addiction that would say, I am a blank addict, and it sort of puts a label on you. I personally think Jesus heals completely. And so those things are in my past. I just can't keep an eye on them. But, and then that last thing about who's your tribe, I'm finding in my life these days that now that I'm doing so much better, that I want and need to show up in a whole bunch of arenas at like a 9 or a 10. And I can't do that alone. Like I can show up really as a good business consultant, but then my marriage is not doing so great. And it's like whack-a-mole. But in order to show up really great across a whole bunch of different arenas, I need community. And so I'm in a group of men that I help lead, connections like this, and just being real,
Mm-hmm.
So that's about as much as I can. That's the short story version of it. Was a dark and stormy night.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to a moment in time and just ask a question as to what.
Don't make me cry here. Yeah.
I'm going to try not to. But honestly, again, I think the summary version of your story just it doesn't do it justice.
It doesn't.
And so just one moment that I would like to share is that I remember the day. I remember where I was. So I was at the base of my driveway, and I had pushed the button for the gate to open.
Mm-hmm.
And the gate is opening. I was coming home from work, and the gate is in the process of opening when you called me and said, Zach, I think I'm going to ask her to marry me. And so fast forward that very same day, take us back to that moment of, again, you had been through so much already.
Yeah.
And this was a glimmer of hope.
Right.
And now we've made a decision like, hey, she's the one.
Right.
And I'm going to ask her to marry me. And when, earlier in your summary version, you said you found her dead, but I think, for our listeners' sake, like, let's go back to that moment for a minute and just share from your heart, like, okay, this is what happened. And then this is, for those that are in that, a very, very, very difficult moment, like what could you share with people on how to come out of that? How did you get, how did you move forward?
Let me see if I can. I love that, Zach. I mean, I love thinking. When I was sharing my story, I've got a guy, Hunter, that works with me, and he's my communications guy, which means he helps me figure out how to say stuff. And so and he's also on staff. He's a communications guy at our church. And I said, hey, I'm going to share this from the stage. And he said to do exactly what you just said, which is go back to a moment and talk about the feelings, that moment, and that's so powerful. And what is really powerful to me is thinking about you in that moment. It's January 9th. It's cold. You're on the farm. There's dust kicking up, whatever that picture is. And so I reached out to Zach, and it was a Saturday morning. And I said, hey, man, I'm not sure exactly when, but I'm asking her to marry me. She's the one. And that was exactly 6 months to the day from when I asked her if she would like to be my girl. And the crazy thing about all this, what I'm going to say here is going to sound a little heretical, but honestly, it's hard for me even now to look back at all of it and just go, was this just some cosmic joke? Like, does God have this like really crazy sense of humor? Because you couldn't have orchestrated. I mean, there are 100 stories from those 6 months that each one of them, you would just go, okay, that is so crazy. I can't. One time I took her to church, and I went to a church that was real creative, and she went to a church that was real liturgical. And she had told me, that we had people paint on stage as part of the worship service. And she's like, and dance. And she's like, okay, I'm sort of getting used to the dancing thing, but the painting stuff is too weird for me. So I took her to this thing, and it was a little prayer service. And we got people to pray for our budding relationship. And on the way out, this young woman hands her a painting, Zach. And it was a paint, and I was a little hand painting. She said, God told me to paint this for you. And I'm like, no, don't do this. It was going so well. And I looked at Ruth was her name. And I said, hey, I don't know what that means. There was a paint, and not only was it a painting, but it was a weird painting. It was a painting of a purple bottle with a lightning bolt hitting it. And I said, I'm sorry, that was weird. I don't know, what that was about. And Ruth looked at me and said, I know what it was about. She tucked it in the purse and never told me. And until the day she died, I didn't know what that meant. Well, after she died, someone said, I can tell you what that means. A couple of years back, we were talking, and we had both said, if we find the right person, God would have to hit me with the bolt of lightning, because I don't think I'm ever going to find somebody. And what's interesting about that too is that symbol has really become very meaningful to me. Lightning in a bottle is the concept of something that's so unusual and so rare that it's almost impossible to happen. And that really reflects in a lot of my work these days, is bringing people together to make impossible things occur, impossible as a team. So anyway, so all that to say, here I am with 6 months to the day, which is another crazy story. And it's the morning, and we had been together the night before. Another crazy story. She'd struggled with employment. Someone had offered her a job, and they had offered to pay her more than she asked. And she's like, oh, well, they probably happens all the time. I'm like, that never happens. Never.
Yeah.
And so we had the finances in place, and we had started talking the evening before about, when we might get married. And we were really, really honoring God in our relationship. It's really good. So I went home super late and got a few hours of sleep. And I texted her in the morning. I said, I got to go see you. I was heading to work at your place. And she's like, you're crazy. You got to go to work. And I was like, I know, I just got to see you for a minute. So I went over and saw her. And we just had the best talk, and really about some things we had never talked about before. And on the way out, she texted, I said, I got to go to work. And I was going to come back that night. I did come back that night, and she was going to make me dinner for my birthday, a month late. And she said, I'm going to wear a pink dress. And I was all, And so I texted you. No. She texted me right after I left, and she said, don't forget to bring home the milk. And she was just being like all domestic. And I thought it was super cute. And then I texted you, and that's when I said, man, I'm marrying this woman. And so I go to work for a few hours. Hugo and I talked that day. I don't remember what we talked about, but I remember standing with him in the kitchen that day going, man, I don't know. I think I said to him, she's the one.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, right.
I remember that.
And you remember that, Hugo?
I do. I was in secondary actually, and I remember you approached me, and it was just a very intimate moment. Like, hey man, like this is it. I'm taking that step, and it meant a lot that you shared that with me. I could see your emotions, and I knew everything that was happening up to that point. So like we share that moment, and I've never forgotten, man.
Wow, this is crazy, guys. This is absolutely crazy. So I probably got nothing done that day. So totally distracted. I didn't stay that long, and I left, and I went and I put on a blazer because she always thought that was super nice. And I got her a couple of treats and some flowers, and I go to her apartment, and she's supposed to be in the kitchen, and I'm expecting to find her covered with flour and frazzled because she's a terrible cook. And it was pitch black. And I knock on the door, and there's no answer. And I'm like, she's also scatterbrained, so maybe she is running late. And I look, and her car is out there, and her roommate is nowhere to be found. And I call her roommate, and her roommate's 2 hours away. And I'm like, Ruth's car is here, and she's not answering the door. Something feels weird. And so bottom line, it took Stacy 2 hours to get there. And Stacy finally lets me in. And I just knew like something's not good. And she went upstairs and tried to wake Ruth up, came back down and said, I can't wake her up. And I thought, I got to do this. Like, I'm the man here. I got to go upstairs and handle this situation. And I went up and I pulled back the sheet. She was face down. And I turned her body over, and it was as stiff as a board, one of those boards behind you, Zach. And her face was purple, her lips were white. And I just cannot even describe the horror. And this alone, some people are like, man, I can't relate to that. And I said, just the horror of finding someone in that state, anybody, a total stranger, is enough trauma to mess you up. And and so,
for the listeners,
I sent you a message.
Yeah, for the listeners, explain what actually happened.
Well, we don't know entirely what happened. We know that she had epilepsy, and there's a thing called sudden unexpected death from epilepsy, which is not very well understood. It occurs to about 1 in 1,000 people who have epilepsy. And basically they go to sleep and they don't wake up. They're not really sure if it's a heart attack or asphyxiation. So I call my friends, you included, people start rallying around me. We're there for a few hours. Her roommate's fiance was a police officer. He and some rescue people carry the body out. And again, it's like a board. And I just started on this journey of like, how the hell am I supposed to deal with this,
Yeah. So looking back, and let me say thank you for sharing that. I think it honors Ruth, and it honors, your story and the redemptiveness of, what we're about to get to, of where you are today, and where God, how he brought you through all of that. And so let's go there. I mean, this is a dark and stormy night. This is a long winter season of your life.
Yeah.
And so, so tell us, like, what were the things that began to help you see that there was something besides winter? I years ago, I wrote a blog about winter seasons and how, like, if you had amnesia and you woke up one morning and it was winter and you were in your boxer shorts standing outside in the middle of the cold, and it's all you knew. It's like, okay, like, I need something on my body besides boxer shorts to keep me warm. I need some shoes. But like, it's all is like, I'm here. It's cold. I have no reality of what spring is, because I don't remember that. I don't know what fall is. I don't know what summer is. All I know is the here, the now, and it's cold, and I feel like I'm going to die and I'm going to freeze to death. And what a miserable situation that would be if you had no context for any other season of life. And so what was the moment that because I'm sure it felt like that for you. I'm sure it felt like this is perpetual winter. Like, just when you thought spring was coming, or just when you thought, things were beginning to turn around, and you made that decision, like, hey, she's the one, I'm going to ask her to marry me. All of a sudden you get hit with a blizzard, and it's 3 feet of snow and the house is caving in. And so talk about that. And then what, when were the moments you began to see the first signs of spring?
Well, it was a very long winter, guys. But I do think that something really critical is that what happened immediately was I was able to share at her service as one of the key speakers, and really share a message that I thought she would want people to hear, which was, this is not the end. This is the beginning for Ruth. But what was really hard for me was I knew that, and people would try to comfort me with that. And I'm like, yeah, that's great for her, but what do I do with this mess? And I began to realize that what was going to happen was not going to be good. And you actually sent me and Stephen Duran out to Colorado for a conference on the heart with John Eldridge and Dan Allender. And I could not sit. Steve was like, what is the matter with you? I just paced the whole time. I listened, but I probably walked 30 miles in the course of that thing because I could not sit down. I mean, this is very, very raw. I'm talking like May, and it's happened in January. And no, it wasn't even May, it was March. And so anyway, I remember I was walking around the books and I'm listening to Dan Allender speak, and he's talking about addiction and trauma and how they're linked. And he said, trauma, that's how people get to addiction, is trauma happens and they just can't process it fast enough. And it's not, even to this day, I am ashamed of the story, because what I should have done and wish I had done, I began writing about the thing, and I think there's a beautiful book in this. And what I should have done was just, lean into God, put aside dating, and write about this, and hop into ministry, and get really involved in church or whatever, all the right things to do. But what I thought was, when you're out at sea, this, right? If you're out at sea on a life raft and you go for a certain period of time, hours, days, whatever, without water, you'll begin to look at the salt water and go, I know this is going to make matters worse, but I have to have water. And you'll drink the salt water and it will make it worse. And that was, whether it's real or not, that felt very real to me. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling friends, like, I don't know what to do, because I think I'm going to start drinking salt water. Mm-hmm. And so I immediately began dating and trying to take matters into my own hands. And so those are not yet the seedlings that are popping up in the spring, but that was what the winter looked like. Mm-hmm. And really, it actually started off sort of like, there were some people who actually had some promise that maybe they would work out, but I was in no place to make it work out. And the longer that I dated, just really the less functional it became. Yeah. And the first sign of spring was probably in 2019. I thought there were signs before that, but in 2019, 3 years later, is when simultaneously I have gotten involved in some group support, and am starting to learn, and I've got a mentor, and I met Susanna, who's my wife now, and we had a date, and she is an incredibly godly and patient woman, because I was not near fixed at that point. But our first date really was also miraculous. She's a scientist and I'm an artist, and we found connections to talk about galaxies and DNA. And then I pulled out my guitar, and she had a song on her mind that I had never sung, but we managed to actually play and sing it together without any rehearsal. And it was so crazy because it wasn't orchestrated, but the song, it's on the door of my office. It's called Hiding My Heart by Adele. And it talks about two people who have to go through life hiding their heart. And at the last verse, it says, I can no longer hide my heart away. She looks up at me and says, hey, have you got allergies? I said, no, I'm actually crying, and I wish I could say then that it was like, from that point forward, everything was rosy, but we dated for a while, and then I wasn't really able to handle it, and we broke up. And then she really took a risk and reached out to me through an email. And I knew that I was going to reach out to her if she didn't first, but she walked with me through the kind of the thawing, and the seedlings popping up, and then that seedling getting trampled underfoot, and then another seedling coming up, until I was in a good enough place to actually be able to go, okay, yeah, I'm ready to step up and be the man. And I would say that was when we stepped into spring, and that was a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we got married. No, it's 2 years ago. And then we got married in December. You were there, December
Yeah, I was
of
there.
2019. Yeah. And yeah, so I think the seedling was at the weekend that we met, which is a really messy weekend, but it was still, it was a seedling.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really long winter.
Ugh,
So
yeah.
what would you share with those listening, as we kind of, man, there's just so many more stories and so much more we could share here, but
Yeah.
for the sake of, trying to keep these podcasts fairly short,
Right.
I would love for you to just reflect on what you want to share with those out there listening that may be in a really, really long winter season, and it just doesn't seem like, there's any sign of spring. Um, what would you like to share?
I'm so glad that you asked that. I have this shirt, I almost wore it today, that has a capital C with a line over the top of it. And I didn't really know what it meant. And my Christian counselor said, hey, she's, and she spends a lot of time in hospitals and stuff. And she's like, hey, do you know what that means? And I said, no. And she said, in medical script, to see with the line over the top of it means with, like Tylenol with codeine. I don't know where that came from. And that word means so much to me. There's a lot of well-meaning people who will come along when you're in winter season and try and talk you out of winter. Hey, it's not really winter, it's spring. Hey, lift your head up. Hey, one person said God needed another flower in their garden, and I went, when Ruth died. And I get it, man. People are just trying to help, but they try to talk you out of it or fix it or whatever. And the people who really, really helped me through this were the ones like yourselves, both of you guys, my best friend Zane, Keith Aycock, a lot of others who said, you know what? I don't have any answers, but I will be with you. I'm not going anywhere. And there were quite a few times when I'm sure I was not easy to be with. And thanks for that eyebrow raiser, buddy.
Yes, I remember that. Very, very good. But to be fair, I did not respond very well either, and so I caused a certain riff in our friendship. But it thankfully it didn't last that long.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't know, man. A hand grenade goes off. It's nobody's fault. Everybody gets hurt.
Yeah.
But yeah, so man. And so when I shared at church, and I would say this to listeners now, a bunch of people came up to me afterwards, and there was just like another horrible tragedy is one of my sons has not spoken with me in almost 9 years now. So this person comes up to me afterwards and says, please tell me that that's not going to happen to me. And I said, well, what's your story? And he said, well, I've got 3 kids who have not spoken with me for 3 years. And I said, you know what? I wish I could tell you that won't happen to you. I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is I'll be your friend and we'll walk through this together. And, that, and these days, in my practice as a leadership coach, I work with a lot of top level leaders who get to talk with me about things maybe they wouldn't talk with somebody else about. And I used to feel like that I needed to solve their problems or they would fire me. And now when I know there's a problem that I can't solve, I'll say, hey, man, that's rough, but at least we can go through this together,
Yeah.
And I think that's just so real. And I think we think a lot of times that's not enough. And it's like, but it's just what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what God does with us. He doesn't say he's going to solve our problems. He says, I'll be with you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's I don't necessarily do this normally with guests on the show, because, a lot of them are just my friends and coworkers and fellow operators and that sort of thing. But you in particular are in a role, where you help people, and you can
Right.
just be, you can just, hey, I may not have all the answers, but I can just be with you through this. And so if other people want to reach out to you, and find you, hear more of your story, or work with you because they're like, man, that guy's been through a lot of stuff and he could
Right. Right.
potentially help me through some of my stuff, how do they find you?
The simplest way to do it is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm right now, Zach, and I'm sure this with you. I'm on day 9 of sharing 100 personal stories every day at 8 a.m. And I'm building a community of 7,000 creative leaders on LinkedIn. And we're 1/4 of the way there as of today. That happened. We went from 24% to 25% today, which is super cool.
Nice.
And a lot of people will say, well, how do I know if I'm a creative leader? And that's like, well, that's your answer. If you wonder, then you're probably a person who has curiosity. And, it doesn't even matter if you're just leading yourself. And like, it's just, I want to learn from people who are learning about creative ways to lead. And so that's the community that we're building. That's the simplest way. If you're not on LinkedIn, peakcoaching.com is www, or text me 828-260-3233. Wide open. So
Yeah. So spell Peak for us.
PEAKE.
Yep.
Being creative.
Yep.
COACHING.com.
Awesome. Well, brother, thank you again for your time, for taking the time to share and be intimate and transparent with us today. So grateful for you and for your friendship, and just to be able to do life with you. Yes. So until next time. In fact, we're gonna record another podcast here in a minute. Our kind of sister podcast, Lean Six Ninja. We're going to talk about continuous improvement and that journey. So if you haven't checked that out, feel free to jump on over. These will probably post at different times, but Lean Six Ninja podcast, lean6ninja.com. Look forward to hosting you there as well. And it'll be a little bit different conversation, but we're looking forward to that. So, all right. Have a great day, guys. Thanks again, and see you soon.
Thanks, man.